When asked, "What is bias?" many of us associate the term with race, gender, or age. In essence, the connotation of bias links it to one's identity or actions against one another. While that can be true in its broadest sense, a bias is simply a preference, and our brains use biases every second of every day. Despite what we may think about ourselves, we all have biases toward something. Since bias is an innate trait of the mind, it is important to understand how they form if we are to overcome them. Biases stem from the way our brains learn. Our brains are made up of tiny machines called neurons. Each of these neurons craves connections with others. When connections are made, learning happens. Repeated connections strengthen what we learn and commit things to memory. This is how we go from babies staring at our surroundings to full-fledged adults navigating the world. However, choosing what to focus on is complicated. With so many bits of information, like the feeling of your clothes, the smell of the room, or background noise, the brain has to filter out only the things worthy of attention. Every second of every day, our brains are tasked with turning billions of pieces of info into manageable knowledge. As we repeat this process over time, neurons keep strengthening connections to each other until our brains become smooth-flowing highways. Things like driving, for example, start out as a series of awkward movements by our hands and legs, but through practice and more neuron interaction, we can eventually perform the task effortlessly with nearly no thought at all. As our brains learn, ideas and beliefs are cemented to knowledge we hold true about the world and each other. But the mechanism that allows us to streamline decisions and actions can inadvertently lead us to develop patterns of thought and clear preferences. With so much to take in, the brain has evolved to take shortcuts in favor of recognizing people and places we've seen before. In other words, the brain forms biases. This can be seen in a few different ways. Familiarity bias is one of the best examples. We learn to trust our family and friends very early in life. It is no surprise that the feelings of connection we hold to our loved ones is exceptionally strong. Consequently, we subconsciously tend to view those who seem familiar in the way they look, sound, or behave more positively. In reality, the other person may not feel the same about us, and a lack of qualifications or red flags about one's character can easily be overlooked due to familiarity bias. Confirmation bias is another example. Once strong connections have been made, it can be very difficult to rearrange our learned patterns. This is part of the reason why changing our minds in the face of new information can be so hard. Our brains put in a lot of effort to learn all we know, so challenging deep-rooted beliefs can be uncomfortable. Consequently, we tend to respond more kindly to information that agrees with what we believe because it aligns with performed ideas about each other. Unfortunately, those ideas aren't always right, and when someone acts in a stereotypical way, some of us may attribute those actions to one's race or age and not to more valid circumstances. At its worst, the combination of familiarity and confirmation bias blend into implicit bias that can lead to serious problems, especially in long-term care. Bias can lead to a lack of diversity amongst the people with which we choose to engage with. Cliques and bullying can often result from the feeling that there are in-groups and out-groups, despite the fact that personality traits and interests are more common than not. In fact, studies suggest that nearly 1 of 5 adults in assisted living or nursing home communities experience bullying, often in the form of exclusion or verbal abuse. Implicit bias has been shown to affect basic medical care. A study conducted of 433 nursing home staff from North Carolina found that fall prevention measures were less likely to be enacted for hypothetical vignettes of Black patients versus their white counterparts, even though the vignettes all contained the same conditions and words. The Association of American Medical Colleges reports that an analysis of 20 years of studies reveals that Black patients are 22% less likely to receive pain medication when compared to white patients. bias can even be seen long before one enters a long-term care setting. A 2010 survey provided through the National Council on Aging, AARP, Family Caregiver Alliance, and the Old Lesbians Organizing for Change Association revealed that 89% of LGBT respondents expected to face some form of discrimination about their identity or orientation. Most of the respondents felt that discrimination by staff would be commonplace. For LGBT individuals already in nursing homes, some experienced clear violation of their rights, such as the home's refusal to accept their partner as medical power of attorney or harassment from residents. Bias is seen on the flip side, too. Most of the hands-on work in nursing homes comes from care workers that are low on the healthcare totem pole. Many workers face difficulty in upward mobility. A 2021 study conducted by the School of Medicine at Chapel Hill, North Carolina, found that 18% of these direct care workers live in poverty, and more than half of these workers are females that do not identify as white. Furthermore, in the Philadelphia area, some long-term care communities don't accept Medicaid. Those that don't tend to be located in affluent areas and serve mostly white individuals. This leaves many Medicaid-accepting facilities as the default option for less fortunate people of color. Systemic racism has thus created a loop in which underpaid minority individuals are caring for other minority groups. Although all of this can seem grim, bias is something that can be overcome. The most important step anyone can take is to recognize that although bias is a part of being human, acting on it is a choice. The most obvious solution is to include people unlike yourself in social places you frequent. But there are other simple tips backed by science. For example, asking yourself what the third-person version of you would do in response to a negative comment or stressful situation has been shown to help take emotion and knee-jerk reactions out of decisions, thus helping to avoid deep-rooted biases. Another trick is to take a second to notice one thing you like about a person before interacting with them. As small as these actions may be, doing them daily helps retrain the brain to resist our faulty initial impressions of each other. Most important of all, remember that change can only happen when a problem is brought to light. As nursing home residents, your right to speak in confidence with the Ombudsman is protected by law. If you feel there is a problem that needs to be addressed, either about yourself or about your home in general, don't wait to reach out.